Hi everyone, welcome to the seventh episode of Career Experts podcast. And today we are doing something different, something really different with someone really with a very different profile. Her name is Dr. Ruchi Agarwal. She has done her MBBS and she has studied from London Business School. But I'm not going to tell you more about it. I think she's a better person to talk about her journey. And if you could just introduce yourself.
Thank you, Anayata, for having me here. So currently, I'm working at McLeod's Pharma in Mumbai in the finance division. However, originally, I am a medical doctor. I graduated from Grant Medical College in Mumbai. And then I worked in pharma for about 3 years before deciding to do an MBA. Went on to pursue the MBA in London at London Business School, did a bunch of different internships, worked for a few different companies, and then eventually came back in 21, 22. And since then, I've been working for McLeod's in Mumbai.
Nice. I mean, London Business School is my dream school, as you already know. That's how I found her also. But I think you're living the dream, touch wood, and I hope you continue living it and do much, much, much more with it. The biggest question which a lot of people need answers to is why did you decide to pursue an MBA after MBBS?
So I think when I decided to pursue an MBA, I'd already been working in pharma for about 2.5 years. So at that time, I remember when I was evaluating the decision, it was more about, do I want to continue doing this like working in business development for Africa, for the pharmaceutical company, or go back to medicine? And something that I had, especially West Africa, is something that I saw administrative changes like done at scale can impact so many patients, and that was something I was kind of enjoying quite a lot, where just the management decisions and the strategy changes can help impact so many patients. So that motivation to work at scale is something that drove me to eventually apply for B schools and then pursue an MBA. Of course, I also applied to MPH because policy is such a big part of administrative change. When I was evaluating the two decisions, and I also got through MPH in the US, but evaluating the two decisions, I felt like just learning management for healthcare and pharma was something that was relatively new, first of all, and there was so much that can be done, while MPH restricts you to policy making and driving decision for someone else, right? So that is where my motivation lies, and so I did the MBA eventually.
Right, got it. I mean, that sounds like a pretty good journey. I mean, I don't think there are a lot of people who want to make the switch. Only thing is that they don't know how to. So I think this is going to definitely help them out, make that decision. So the next question that I have for you is how did you go about choosing your course and college? And both, like, since you said MPH, like you've touched a bit on that, if you could elaborate more on it.
Sure. I think once I decided that I wanted to dive a little deeper on the management aspect, then it was, of course, MPH versus MBA. That was the first decision. The second was if an MBA or even an MPH, then do I do it in India versus in another country? And the last was if even if I do it in any country or in India, how long should the course be? So these were three big decisions that I was trying to make at that point. Now, first, why MBA versus MPH? I think the three big levers I used at that time were first was working backwards on what kind of job opportunities come to an MPH, what kind of job opportunities come to an MBA, and a lot of the people I spoke to at that time were of the opinion that if you do an MPH, there's a lot of research options that you can avail, and then there's the next steps to it is of course doing a PhD. That is something that did not align with my goals, and so I took a pause there. I remember I'd gotten through Hopkins and I spoke to a very bright student there. She walked me through the whole career trajectory, and at the end she gave a very valuable advice, which was around like, if you know that 10 years from now you're okay with doing research and kind of advising on policies, then this is the perfect career start. So that is something that immediately I knew that 10 years from now I would I would not be someone who can advise, like who can research and advise on policy. And so I had to take a pause there.
Hmm.
So it narrowed it down to the MBA. Of course, there were other decisions as well. If you do an MPH, the kind of visa support you get. A lot of students at that time in the US were facing troubles where they were not able to secure the visa or the sponsorship, so had to come back, then go back. And that is something that I felt it was only going to get worse, which eventually, sadly, it did. So the visa support is something that I also evaluated. And of course, the finances involved and return on investment on those finances. So I think on all these points, the MBA for me came on top. Again, all this I'm trying to say from the perspective of an intern or someone who's a medico and try is evaluating if they want to kind of make the same decisions or if they are at that, precipice where they want to make that decision. So I'm trying to think from that angle right now when I speak. The second is once you decide that you want to do an MBA, do you want to do it in India versus other countries? I think for me, and I feel like many people can use these four metrics. But of course, the more you speak, the more you research, you develop your own opinions and preferences. So for me, I think the four metrics were one, the credibility of the place, the institution you do it from. Number two is the career trajectory of the people who've passed out of the university. Most people, not like the outliers who turn on to become like the biggest businessmen in the world, but just most people, what are their trajectories like? Number three, what is the environment in the school like? So I think what is important is when you're a medico and you're going from this hospital contained environment to the big bad world of corporate, there's a lot of soft skill learning, there's a lot of nurturing, there's a lot of growth that happens in that period. And if the school and students around the in your cohort, if they are used to such a growth phase and they can kind of help you and nurture your growth, then it's a very big plus point. Like it's a very subtle thing, but I think it helps quite a lot. So a lot of people I spoke to, I tried to gauge what the environment in the school was like, how many outliers or how many oddballs there are in the school. Are there people from the arts field in the school? Are there people from medicine? And are they kind of, is the school helping them in any way? So
Right.
that is something that I kept as a lens. And the last was, of course, the finances. These using these four metrics, I think I spoke to over 30 to 40 MBA pass outs or current candidates in India and abroad. And I felt eventually what was happening for me specifically was a lot of B schools in India have only 10% diversity. And in that
Hmm.
10%, what counts as a diversity is also someone who's probably an art student or who is an entrepreneur. And if entrepreneurs are counted as a diversity in a B school, I feel that something was a little off there. There were not many medicos in most Indian schools, which is okay. I spoke to someone at a gentleman at ISB who was extremely helpful, and he also kind of was of the opinion that it is a little difficult to navigate when you're the only medico in the batch, and then you have
Right.
to figure out what works for you. So I think that is something which kind of then drove me to consider these schools abroad. Especially in the UK, what had happened at that time was the visa situation had become quite favorable. So a lot of people from different countries and backgrounds were migrating to the UK. So especially when I spoke to people at London Business School, Oxford, what I recognized was diversity is quite normal there. It's not like something they need to deal with. Especially like when I did the MBA, there were about six medicos in the batch.
Right.
So it was easy to have a shared experience. It was easy to exchange notes. It was easy to build like a growth curve where you can kind of learn from your peers as they are also going through a similar journey.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that is the tier or that is the lens I use for MBA in India versus abroad.
Right.
However, very big caveat I should put here is the finances. The If you do an MBA abroad, the expenses are at least 5 times more than in India. And I want you to like think about it in like let that sink in and evaluate if that is an investment you're ready to make at this point. If not, it is okay, and you can. And these schools in India are just as great. Everything that they teach technically, the soft skills, they're at par with schools abroad. So that should not hold you back, I feel. Um, I just use that one extra lens, and that's why it helped me gravitate towards towards an MBA in the UK. But it's okay if you do not, if that's not the only lens you want to use.
Right.
Yeah. And the last part was, how long should an MBA last? I think this is not spoken about a lot, but generally all over the world there are two formats that now exist. One is a 1 year format, one is a 2 year format, like a 21-month or a 24-month, depending on the internships and so on. I think for a medico, going from a very structured environment of working in a hospital and only and working with patients, and going to this world of analytics and kind of continuously working on problem statements and businesses and stuff like that, there it's a very big growth curve and it's quite steep. So when I was speaking to a few folks, what I learned was 1 year can be quite intense, especially when you also have to search for a job, because
Right.
there's this whole learning around technical skills, about analytics, about Excel modeling, about business, like business plans and different business models that exist out there. And then at the same time, you have to search for a job. And that is such a painful part, because I didn't want that at the end of 12 months, I, I'm exhausted and tired, and I still don't have a clue on how to approach the next steps.
Hmm.
I don't want that to be the journey. Hence, the 2 year program for someone like me, an average medical student, and then a graduate, having worked in pharma for some time, having that average kind of profile, I feel it felt the right thing to do, to kind of give me that time for 2 years, evaluate different options, try different internships and jobs. So I think, hence the 2 year program in the UK, and an MBA made sense for me.
Right.
I don't know if it makes sense and if it's a lot, but like I was trying to break down uh, how I thought about it.
No, it definitely does because yesterday I had a conversation with someone and she was like, I don't know if I should go. Like, she was really, like she was more inclined towards a 2 year thing, not an MBA, but she was like, most UK colleges offer a 1 year program. But I'm of the opinion that for some people, even the 1 year course will work out. But what I want to know from you is, both in the 1 year and the 2 year course, is there a major difference between the education that is being provided or the hands-on experience that we get? Is it lesser in the 1 year course, or is it, because that's a common question that people have? So,
Yeah, so the education, rest assured, there is no difference.
right,
In fact, some people even go out to say that the 1 year program, because it's so intense, that you learn a lot more. In the 2 year program, the second year is a lot more relaxed. So
right,
you kind of tend to start easing out a lot.
right,
So there's not the, in terms of the technical skills, the soft skills that the B school teaches, there's not a lot of difference. However, in terms, when you mention the word hands on, what I think of hands on is like doing different projects, different internships, networking with different folks,
right,
and kind of maybe getting some small projects here and there. Uh, that kind of makes a lot of difference. So, in the 1 year program, a lot of times what people do is they almost in the first 3 months, they start thinking of their exit plan. So,
right.
then they have to narrow down on that job in the first 3, 4 months,
Okay.
which can be quite hectic. So that's the only difference I would say. So imagine you start in September, by December, you should start recruiting and have a full time job plan almost in place. So when
Got
you
it.
graduate in the next few months, you will know where you're exiting to. However,
Hmm.
in a 2 year program, you have like the first few months, of course, you apply for internships. And then you can evaluate if you like the internship. You don't like it, you apply to someplace else. That's
Got
the
it.
only difference.
Understood. And as of what I know, don't most UK colleges offer a 1 year program only, apart from LBS? I think LBS has different exit options, but in the UK, there are 1 year programs only, right?
Yeah, so UK, Europe, they're popular for 1 year programs. So
Okay.
UK, Oxford, Cambridge, um, INSEAD, IE, in India, ISP, all of them offer 1 year programs. And
Right.
also, I need to correct myself there. There are internships in the 1 year program as well during the summer that people
Yeah.
pick up. Uh, However, because it's so close to graduation, and there's not a lot of space where, if say something starts in Jan, then you do
Hmm.
an internship, and again, like by the time you come back, you have to start recruiting. So
Right.
most programs start in Jan. So there'll be like Jan to March you recruit, do the internship in the summer months, and then come back and recruit again. And
Right.
that part gets intense. So I
Interesting.
stand corrected on the earlier point.
Okay. Because that is also one of the points that she mentioned that, in 1 year programs, we don't get enough internship opportunities, which I thought that that's not the, like we do have a couple of internships, but like you said, it must be a lot back to back and intense that ways. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, what are some of the good top colleges in the UK and Europe that people can aim for?
So, like I mentioned, there is LBS, there is Oxford, there is Cambridge, there is IE, that's in Spain, there's INSEAD, then there is Imperial as well, Imperial College London. What else? Yeah, these are the six colleges I kind of uh, know people from.
Yeah.
So I think that those are good six benchmarks to have.
Yeah. And HEC Paris too?
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
HEC
I
Paris.
forgot about it.
Yeah.
HEC is
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think these are the only ones that even I know based on my research, the top ones.
Yeah, the top ones.
Apart from that, what I want to know and what most people are confused, like I majorly, yes, have dentists, but now that we've expanded, there are a lot of MBBS graduates also asking, why did you not go for a healthcare MBA and you went for a conventional MBA? Could you just highlight on what's the difference between the two as well?
About the healthcare MBA versus the conventional MBA, right? So conventional MBA, for the sake of discussion, is just an MBA without any such label of promising a healthcare job, and you do it anywhere in the world. That's a conventional MBA. However, there are a few schools that offer specifically focused healthcare MBA, right? Now, the bottom line and the spoiler alert here is that um, all that you learn in a healthcare MBA, you're taught in a conventional MBA. However, a lot of experiences and a lot of learnings from conventional MBA do not get translated to the healthcare MBA.
Right.
Let me break it down a little. So imagine, so the typical career trajectory of someone who is pursuing a healthcare focused MBA is someone who wants to go into hospital administration. They've probably done it for a few years. They are either medicos or non medicos, but they're focused on working in hospital administration. And when they when they do that MBA, it promises them the growth to the next position. um,
Right.
a lot of times hospital MBAs are also not full-time MBAs, especially some courses in Bombay. They are part-time offerings. Sometimes they can be a full-time course, or they can be like the last few months of specialization. You do a conventional MBA almost, and then the last few months you specialize in it. um, so that's a convention, that's a healthcare focused MBA. Now, when you do a conventional MBA, that is where you kind of enter, do the same technical skills, you learn the soft skills, you go through the whole recruitment process. And at that time, you can also apply to hospitals
Right.
and you can work in the hospital administration. The only difference here would be that there'll be some like there'll be one or two electives that must have been taught in healthcare elective, where they talk about how different hospitals work through their management and what their organogram looks like. But this is something you can learn on the job. This is not something you will miss out on. So what I learned from speaking to a few candidates and researching on the internet overall was that one, a conventional MBA and is going to offer almost the same offerings as a healthcare MBA, and there's nothing that you're missing out. Number two is that the conventional MBA has this added advantage of networking with people from different walks of life, with working with entrepreneurs in the healthcare space, non-healthcare space, pharma space, life science space, all these related fields that a healthcare MBA does not offer.
Right.
Number three, sadly, I must say this, that a lot of these programs, though they promise great things, the credibility of the course is not that high, or the school is not that high. So all the time that we talk about B schools, I think we should always remember that it's the B school that holds the credibility, not the course.
Correct.
So these are the three big takeaways for like healthcare focused MBA versus a conventional MBA.
Right.
Of course, to each their own. And if there is something that you've kind of researched and chanced upon it, and you recognize that healthcare focus will help you a lot, then please go for it.
Right. But I also feel that a conventional MBA gives you more opportunities in terms of jobs. Like it helps you expand further rather than just be limited to the healthcare space, which a lot of people that I meet in Odigio, they keep asking me, like, first of all, people think we'll get to that bit also. First of all, people think they can't do the math bit of it. And the second thing is that they don't want to leave the healthcare space. But what most of them fail to understand is that even when you do a conventional MBA, you can still remain in the healthcare space while, like you said, networking or talking to or gaining experience from different walks of life, people from different walks of life. So I guess that's something that I have also understood based on, what I've researched. But yeah, to each their own, definitely.
You've
Oh,
summarized it well. I feel like the way you said it makes a lot of sense. And that that added exposure is where the MBA does add a lot of value.
yeah.
So yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I love that we are on the same page, and I'm thinking like you like it. Okay. So, okay. Now, another very popular question. Is it worth doing an MBA post your MBBS or MD? I don't know if people generally do it after an MD, but is it worth doing it? And like, it's like a merged question, but is the return on investment good enough?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think the short answer to that is yes. However, it depends on what your goal is. What if your goal is where if you just want to continue working in the hospital, and this is doing an MBA is going to be almost like a distraction from that 2 years of practice, then why do it? Like if you don't want to kind of get your hands dirty in that aspect, then it's okay to not do it. But doing an MBA for an MBBS, or for a medical doctor in general, for a physiotherapist, for a dentist, I think there are so many transferable skills that you take away from this experience. It's difficult to learn them in the real world because no one is going to hold your hand and teach you these little concepts around negotiations, around bargaining with different vendors, around even when you're running your own hospital. So how do you kind of manage, evaluate if you want to open a new wing of the hospital, or do you want to like continue working in this wing? How do you evaluate if you want to buy a new machine or you don't want to buy it? How do you evaluate if this wing of your hospital or this clinic is working well? So all these um, problem statements is something that we are not taught, or and maybe some people are gifted enough and they might just learn it on the go, but this is something that you're not really taught and kind of given training in. So what do you do with your money? Like all these, a lot of doctors, I like when my colleagues who I speak to, my friends, a lot of times the basic questions are like, oh my God, I have to file my taxes. I have to like, what do I do with my, salary? All these little questions, right? Um, this is something no one is going to teach us. So I think doing an MBA, keep all things aside, keep all your goals aside, working in corporate sides and all of this, just gives you that little set of transferable skill, that small set of transferable skills where you can use in your day-to-day life in whichever sphere of life you work in, right?
Right.
So I think that itself is a very big plus. Something, Anahita, that I also want to highlight here is that when we talk about this career choice of doing an MBA, doing management, pursuing MPH or anything like that, we just think that this is the end. Okay, now you've switched careers, this is your end, like you are not going back to medicine. And this is something I feel is a very wrong lens. You can continue practicing and you can take a year's break, go to a good school, get your MBA and come back and practice. It does not have to be an end. It is just an additional skill set that you're learning, right?
Right.
Of course, there are a lot of decisions you have to weigh and evaluate of that 1 year break that you take, and it has to be worth it. But it need not mean that it's an end to your practicing life
Right.
of medicine. So that is just one big overarching point I want to make, where like, is doing an MBA worth it? Yes, it is.
Hmm.
However, now if you talk about like, is doing an MBA worth it for the people who want to get into corporate and are medicals? I mean, 100%. Like, no matter how talented you are in life, no one is going to, all these recruiters sitting in different offices and all these headhunters, they only understand like that one page CV. And they only kind of value that depth of experience and credibility that you bring in different jobs and offerings. So like, say you're applying to work in the strategy team of some company, if you don't have any past experience, if you don't have any credibility through like your education or some course or some research or something like that, no one's going to invite you on that table. You have to like really show that through your profile. So I think, yes, doing an MBA definitely is quite helpful for someone who wants to switch to corporate. However, something you just keep in mind is the timing. When do you do it? Do you do it immediately after passing out of like after out of medicine? Do you wait for some time and so on? That is something I would caveat and put it on the side.
Right. Got it. That makes sense. And I believe that before you get into any masters, you should definitely get some work experience. That is something which people, like, I cannot emphasize on this more because it's always a rat race, especially for us. कि BDS कर लिया, now you have to do an MBS, MDS. अभी MBBS कर लिया, now you have to do an MD, so on and so forth. So I think that is the bit that like people don't understand, that get some work experience before you get into your master's degree. That's very important. Is the return on investment after London Business School, like, is there a good return on investment for everyone who goes in? And I think along with this, I'll just ask it here itself, even though it's down below. But if coming back to India after doing an MBA from LBS, would it be fruitful, or would there be some amount of return on investment?
So I think the way I look at return on investment is as simple as whatever job, all the investments that you've made, which is, for me, it came out to be the school fee plus the living cost, right? So on an average, for a student going to the UK and say doing a 2 year course, it will come to around, in that year, so in 2019, it came to around 120K pounds, which is quite a lot. However, now it's also much more. Like, I think now it's much higher. It's around 150 pounds, 150K pounds. So
Yeah.
150,000 pounds. So that is the investment you're making in addition to your time, right? So just like thinking from a Marwari brain, that 150K is something that you have to get back in the next
Right.
few years.
Hmm.
Um, what I saw in my peers at the B school and just through my experience was this is something you can get back in the first 3 years of your job, first 2 years, depending on which job and so on. Of course, and you if you have a loan to fulfill and so on, the time period changes a little depending on which country you're from and so on. But in the first 2 3 years, it'll be fine. You will break evens there. So it won't be something that is looming for you for like 6 years and 7 years or 10 years. And you're like, oh my God, like, what have I done to me? So just the basic salary after graduating from, say, LBS was around 80K
Right.
a year. Um, and this is when you're not even going for the best school, best offerings and the best offices and so on. Like this is like a medium tier job, right?
Hmm.
So in 3 years after, like, of course, there's a lot of adjustments and you do kind of live a little bit of a base life, but you can break even then. So to your question of is the return on investment good, just financially, yes, you will break even 3 years, and then just imagine whatever job you were doing, you'll also get promotions, and there's
Yeah.
also a lot of growth happening. So then that is where you kind of start growing, and that itself is quite high. So just financially, I think it's good. In terms of time, I feel yes, I do see a lot of value in putting in those two focused years, and eventually once you graduate you get the credibility, and then you also get a jump in the job or um, the position that you applied for.
Right.
So that growth curve post graduation is quite good. So I think yes, to your question, yes, is there is a good return on investment here.
Okay, cool. That sounds really hopeful. Really, really hopeful. And does everybody get a job after, an MBA after, from LBS? Has everybody gotten placed? And if yes, then what is the time frame by which most people get a job?
See, I think right now we are in a very tricky situation where a lot of people have lost their jobs. They've had to like switch jobs. There's not a lot of consulting projects coming in. So a lot of people are benched. So all of that is also in play right now, the current macroeconomic space. However, for our batch specifically, it's not necessary that in the last 3 months of your B school journey, everyone has a job. A lot of people are searching for their jobs. A lot of people are going through a very unstructured route and they're taking their own time. And it is not easy. It's quite stressful. Um, Securing a job immediately after you graduate is not easy. However, many people do get a job in the first 6 months post graduation, and by first, like in the first year, everyone has secured some or the other job that might not be their ultimate calling. That might not be like, oh my God, this is my dream job, but this is somewhere they land. And then, of course, the whole idea is to for the next 3 years to build to get to your maybe a dream job or more favorable job or something that aligns with your value system better. So to your question, does everyone get a job? Yes, but there's a time frame. So it's 6 months where most people get it, then 1 year where almost everyone gets it, and then for the next 3 years, people are just evaluating, switching jobs. I think our school ran a survey, and around 58% people switch jobs in the first year of graduation, like post first year of graduation, which is quite high. Imagine, so everyone who secures a job is like they are going to switch. The 58% are going to switch.
Yeah,
Uh,
got it. That is pretty
so
high.
yeah.
That is actually pretty high. But at least they get a start, right? I mean, that is what is most important because A, you're in a different country and you have invested money. You really want to get at least something back, right? And you have invested the time as well. And another question, will it be worth it coming back to India? And would the salaries be the same? Because since you're in the market, so you would know better. Like on an average, would the salaries come out to be like, if someone's from London Business School, would they get equivalent salaries? Would it be by the Indian standards or would it be by the London standards? Which I don't think
Oh,
it would.
that's a great question. The salaries are not the same. You have to take a cut in salary when you do come back.
Hmm.
But so I let me give you like an example. So say in London, if your monthly salary is around 8K, 8,000 pounds, about 60% is already spent, and then the is spent on like your essentials, and the 40% is of course like paying back loans, and there's a lot of other additional overhead costs. So at the end, you are just left with the last 10% for the next before the next salary comes in.
Right.
So the living costs are quite high in London. So 8K, and then imagine very high living cost. When you come to India, you almost are working on one third the salary
Hmm.
than in the UK. However, the living costs are also adjusted. It's
Yeah.
much lower. Um, and even when you come back, you still have to prove your merit to this demographic
Hmm.
because you have stayed in a different country. And so now you have to like prove, okay, I can still deliver here. I can still kind of, you still have to prove your merit and grow through the ranks. It's not that you're going to come from LBS and they're going to be like, oh, just put her at the top, you know? So that curve still has to be lived. But to a point of are you paid off like to Indian standards or the UK standards? You're 100 paid as per the Indian standards. So 100% you have to like live through that journey. However, I think like different people have different challenges. A lot of folks had to re- pay back their loans. So it just practically did not make sense for them to come back.
Right.
Uh, so, yeah, I would just say like keep those factors in mind and evaluate as per um, the loans and the living quality of life and all of those things.
That makes a lot of sense. Mainly, I ask this because people should not have false expectations that if you do it from LBS, you'll come back here and then you'll get the best of everything. You have to, like you said, work the ranks. That's definitely there. Okay. So, can you expand a little bit more on what the application process is like? And can you also give us like a breakdown of the requirements in the application process?
So, um, so the whole application journey maybe starts about 15 months before you want to actually start your MBA. So, for example, you want to start your MBA in 2024 September. Okay. So now we're in the month of November of 23. To anyone new to the process, it would look like there's a lot of time, right? There are quite a few months. However, I think to do justice to the whole application process, you should start about 15 months before the course starts. So, like September, I would say start somewhere around June. No, June is also quite late. Start around April or May. Um, Now, when I say start around April or May, now what is it that you should be kind of ready with around April or May? Um, there are three parts to an application process for a B school. One is your GMAT/GRE score. Number two is your application, the written application. And number three is the interview. Now, in the month of, say, now let's assume that the person I'm speaking to wants to start in September 24, right? I would say in Jan of 23, they should start working on their GMAT. For in about 6 months or a year, or how much ever time it takes to crack. The whole idea is to give a lot of time to that GMAT application or GRE and get the desired score. The indicative scores for each of the B schools are available online. So with a little research, you can get to what score should you target. But I would say Jan of 23, start with your GMAT GRE preparation process. say in the month of May, you've given that exam, or June, you've given the exam, you've gotten sort of a decent score, and you kind of now are evaluating what to do next. Now is a good time to kind of start working on the research around what is the actual component of the application that is required. So just a statement of purpose or just a letter, just starting to directly write those letters will not help. It is important to kind of research these courses in depth. Um, each of the B schools have their own perks and have their own preferences, have certain big turnoffs, if you may call them, of like what they don't or like in an application. So in those few months, I would say start researching voraciously, reading about different B schools, speaking to people. Like I would put a target of say 5 people. I have to reach out to 5 people every day on LinkedIn to speak to them. Eventually, at the end of process, I think I've spoken to around 40 to 50 people for this whole application. So in the next few months, like after your score is in place, I would say start researching a lot about schools. Once you've done that, then would be the time to start working on the applications, the written application, and eventually there's the interview. So the first round should be the ideal target. Uh, I think first round, of course, I have to revisit the dates and so on, but like a lot of interviews went for the first round are conducted in November. So I think you can finish your applications by September or October. That is an ideal journey. Of course, things change quite a lot. And everything needs to be revisited as time comes. But this would be an ideal journey of starting in Jan, keep giving her exams, researching about the schools. By around August, September, your applications should be ready. And then the last is the interview process, which is, of course, not in our hand, but then that is the preparation, the last bit of preparation.
The standardized tests, like when you're going for the GMAT or the GRE, what are the resources that you use to prepare? What is the average score that someone should get, average score that someone should get or aim for to get into the top B schools? And yeah, how did you prepare, and how long did it take you, or how long does it generally take? And one thing that came when you were, talking about the application, how do you manage with a full-time job? Like, how do you make that balance of, doing so many things?
Yeah, there's no right answer here. But I think a good way to go about the standardized test is that um, when you do start, it's good to kind of research a little online to understanding what is the structure of these programs and like of these exams and so on. That's just a very basic. You can skim through the research. It's okay just to know this exists. Um, I'll just talk about my experience and how I went about it. And maybe then we could generalize it a little. So, the first thing that I should mention is I gave the GMAT twice. And even after the second attempt, I was not convinced. I mean, like, I was ready to give it the third time. And most of the people, surprisingly, at LBS had given it also a few times. So, it is to whoever who's listening this bit right now, I just want you to know it's okay to give this exam as many times as you wish, and it's okay to fail the first time. So this exam or GRE is the kind of exam where you probably have to give a few times to get it right. It's the right timing, the right day, everything counts. That's number one. Number two is the resources that are available online. So the way I approached it is that I did a lot of wrong things before I got to the right thing, right? I didn't really know many people who had done what I'd done, what I was trying to do. So I had to like go through all the learnings. So the first thing is I went through a lot of online programs. The Economist hosts like an amazing guided online program for GMAT, and I took that. I took a lot of GMAT books. There's Magoosh, and there's a lot of. I did it basically. It was self-guided, so I did not really go to a class or go to a tutor for it. I think it is good to get you to a base, to get to a certain point of around 600, where, mind you, the a good score is around 760 or something like that. So all these learnings are good to get you to like around 600. However, I think it is amazing if you can afford or reach out to a tutor and take a few sessions with them, because they help you target these problem sets better, and they kind of help you jump that score. So the whole target for a GMAT score is to like get to say 700, 720, 730. For a medico, again, like all of this has to be from an angle of a medico. Um, so I think going to a tutor really helps. Um, I personally went through this whole economist thing, got all these books, did multiple trial tests, like the tests that are available online. Did all of that, got to around 580, 600, and then I was not improving. So that bit of improvement, again, uh, I did the next bridge, like for the next attempt. I think there was a lot more focus I uh, put on, I don't know, my problem areas, and just targeting those. I reached out to a tutor, but eventually it did not work out, and I just had to like do it on my own. But I would highly recommend getting a tutor for anyone who's going through that process right now. It helps you cut down that whole learning curve by a lot. Like you just get there quicker. Um, I would also there are some online forums for GMAT, uh, and I think it's quite common and popular. So I think I would highly recommend that you be a part of it. Uh, Go through learnings of different people and do many problem sets. There's a lot of recommendation online on how to approach it, and I think you should be a part of such forums.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's the structured bit. It took me a lot of time. I was the last round candidate. Hence, I recommend that you start much earlier. I started in the month of, say, May or June-ish. And my final attempt, like my second attempt, I had given in December, Jan. So it took me around 7 months-ish. Um, and I'm sure if I had given it proper decent time, it takes much longer. um so that's one. And in terms of like, yeah, of course, doing it while you're working, I think weekends is the only time you can capitalize. There's there's no two ways about it. Maybe during the weekdays you can study after your normal work day, but weekends is when you capitalize and do a bulk of this work. For a medico, I would say that it's also um, a good thing if you can save all your holidays and before exams. um, Say when you're in the deepest part, in the trenches of your exam preparation, that's when you should just kind of use all your holidays and give it that last you know push. So yeah, it's quite stressful, but I think like just the whole idea is you have to capitalize on the weekends and like give the whole weekend to only this.
Got it. I mean, I did, and we've had a lot of discussions on this, but we're not getting through my journey. But for anyone who's listening, I would just say I didn't do this before, but I gave the GMAT was pretty tough for me. Like, hats off that you did GMAT. GMAT was pretty, the math was really tough for me. So I gave the mock for GRE and I also gave a mock for GMAT, and then I did better in GRE. So I went with that. So I would just like to throw that in that, you can also take that mock and go with the score. I mean, go with the one that suits you better, the pattern that suits you better. Because up to both of them, GMATs also become focused edition and GREs also become shorter. So that's a big boon. I would definitely say that having given both of them once, so that. And yes, the bit on how it's okay to give it multiple times, like that's the thing. They're not really looking at how many times you have given it, but they're looking at your growth and how well you've done. So I think that's what you need to focus on. Okay. Then okay,
One
so
thing I really like that you mentioned that you give a basic mock test. Like that is something that really helps kind of set a benchmark of where you are. So I'm glad that you did it. And it kind of, especially now that GRE has become more acceptable, I think it's a very good starting point.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with what you said.
I'm also glad, because otherwise I would be struggling with GMAT, because I was genuinely not good at their question problems, and my verbal was much better in the GRE when compared to the GMAT, because I was just intuitively good at the words thing that they have, which was just a boon for me. So that really, really helps. Okay, so
Perfect.
I think the next question that we move on to is, how did you get a job after your MBA? Basically, the whole process of how someone finds a job. It doesn't have to be your personal journey, but in general, how do people find a job? And what is there any placement support? And average salaries we've covered, but I would just like you to put it in here once, so that in the time stamping it comes all together. So yeah.
Of course. Um, yeah, I think let me kind of just put a framework in place. So from the lens of LBS, there is of course a career center, and there's a lot of support from your peers also in hunting for jobs. So there is that support available. However, in India, there is this whole idea of um, structured recruiting where they come to the campus and there's like a recruitment drive of sorts, right? Uh, that is not so common there. However, there is a structured component where consulting firms and investment banking firms do come to the campus, or like their applications are open and you just kind of apply to them. However, there's no recruitment drive as such. There is a structured component. They come to the campus for the first round of interviews. After that, you of course have to go to their offices.
Right.
So that is the structured part of it. There is a lot of support that is available, especially through your peers. I feel like the career center, of course, they can offer, some degree of help. But I found a lot of help from my peers who had worked in the jobs that I'd already that I wanted to apply to, and they kind of guided me on what works and what does not work, how to go through the application process. So that is just before starting the application process. These are the sources I reached out to. um, there are some online softwares or applications, you may call them, which help you tailor your CV. So, like, just cleaning your CV makes a lot of difference. So, there's a lot of online support that is available. I'm sure if you Google it, you can, find some of these sources. But if at all you ever get lost, you can also reach out to me, and I'll help you guide through the sources. So that is the part before starting the application process. Now, in terms of, sorry, your question was, I know, how do you get to a job? So once you've kind of amassed some sources, it's good to evaluate one, where does your interest lie? For me, I was confident that it had to be in the healthcare space or in the pharma space. I didn't want to kind of go to retail or go through finance or fintech. That was not something that I related with. So hence I kind of stuck to my lane. Now, once you know that, again, there is this whole range of options that is available, right? So let me kind of break it down and walk you through it. Um, in terms of the structured options, there is a lot of strategy consulting and management consulting that's available out there for recruitment. Of course, it's extremely challenging and competitive, but it's available. Then there's investment banking, which is also focused towards healthcare. So one of my peers I know eventually went on to pursue investment banking. He's also a medico. Um, and that is also an option that's open. So I, again, all this, when I say, I want you to think, I'm placing my feet in the shoes of um, an intern or a student or a medico who wants to evaluate what does post MBA world look like and what options are available. So there's consulting, there's investment banking. This is more structured. Then there is pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of pharma options available, but specifically if you're applying from the UK and you want to stay in the UK, there's not a lot of sponsorship available. So though pharma is extremely lucrative, I want you to remember that if you do apply for pharma, you will have to probably evaluate coming back or wherever there is an opening in their basket. Generally, pharma prefers to keep home country candidates in the home country, and this way they kind of ensure that there's more authentic experience in building the product. So pharma is something that will not sponsor visa, but it's a great option to have. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of leadership programs in pharma right now. And I mean, like, if you're passionate about that space, it's amazing how MBA candidates grow once they step in pharma. So that is pharma. So there's a little less structured route, which is basically newer companies, new age companies, digital tech, digital healthcare. There is medical devices, there's medtech, there is all sort of such startups. It's extremely unstructured, to be honest, and this heavily relies on your networking skills. However, if you have found your passion to work with a certain company, with a certain group of people, with a certain goal, with a certain drive to kind of deliver that product to the masses, then it is amazing, and it's something that people really enjoy to be in. Like the startup world of healthcare is whoever I know who's working in that segment is really learning a lot and growing from it. So that's a little less structured. And of course, the other end is also VC. VC is completely unstructured. That's venture capitalism. It's extremely unstructured. You have to recruit like crazy. Everything has to be a part of negotiation, and it's also difficult to kind of get that recruitment in. However, if that's your passion and that motivates you, of course, that option is available. So I've almost covered most bits. There's private equity. There are a few other spaces that I've left. But that's just because I don't know many people who are working in private equity in medicine. So I just don't want to give you the false hopes that that's available. Maybe it is, but I just don't know people. So this is the whole spectrum that's available. Now, in terms of how I approached it, I think one thing that I did was I did a lot of internships in the period that I was there. So I worked for a digital health company, digital health focused company rather. I worked for a medical device company. I worked for strategy consulting. I worked for big pharma, and I tried to evaluate if this is something that I want to learn in or grow from, and like the pros and cons, all the whole SWOT analysis. So I did the whole spectrum, and eventually in December 21, I decided to come back to India. And of course, for different personal reasons, but here, once back, I was confident that I wanted to work in pharma, and given like just the personal background that I had, it just made more sense.
Right, that makes sense. That makes sense. And we've done the bit on the salaries, but if you could just in brief, if you could just touch upon that, that would be great.
Great. So salaries, post exiting from MBA, what are the salaries like? Something as basic as around 60, 70K. It depends on where you're going and what your negotiations are like. So, but the most structured companies like the consulting firms or IB, the packages are already pre-decided, so there's not much you can negotiate, and it's always like north of 100K as the first starting point. However, it's increased much more, but I just have to say that this is all benchmark from maybe 2 years back, but it has increased. So there's a lot of that. And then there are some startups that you work for, or like some VCs, where I know someone who had started with a startup with at around 70K uh, pounds, and it was I think eventually they grew quite a lot in this whole in their ladder, but that was their starting. So yeah, those are the spectrums. But in India, of course, it will be as per Indian standards. It won't be as per the UK
Yeah,
standards. So it will be a little lower.
right. So, do these startups also, the digital health or the medtech startups that you're talking about, do they also sponsor visas or no? Because just like
Uh,
pharma.
it it depends, to be honest. Like I think I feel it's surprising that sometimes they just decide that they want to sponsor the candidate because they really feel there's value add there. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, I won't be able to sponsor, but you can work for a year. So it's a lot of negotiation, and it depends from company to company.
Right.
But this is a conversation you can have with the recruiter on day one.
Okay, got it. Before going
And
through the
also,
process.
yeah, something that I feel one should evaluate is going through a headhunter. So this is now increasingly becoming popular and common. So if you are in the process and you're doing something atypical, where you're doing a triple switch, switching countries, career, uh, so there uh, it is better if you kind of go through a headhunter in the unstructured bits, because they can kind of put your name in the rooms where you cannot reach.
Right.
So something that the candidates can at some point evaluate is this.
So they just like network with them to, get a like reach out to the headhunters. You network with them on LinkedIn or other places like that.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a fee involved and all of that. So I think that's a conversation for another day, but definitely keep it on the radar. Don't be disheartened by the process. If it's not working out, reach out to a headhunter and something eventually clicks.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
So, okay, the next question is that it's really clear that, like we need work experience, but I would just ask, should you have some work experience before doing an MBA? And do B schools accept you if you don't have work experience?
Oh my God, I'm so glad you asked this. Absolutely. Please get work experience, no matter where you're working. If you even decide to do an MBA in Bombay, in India, where most of the candidates are freshers, please get a work experience in. It can be just 1.5 year, 2 years, whatever, but just get it. Now, do B schools accept candidates without a work experience? Most of the schools in the UK do not. LBS specifically does not. Europe also is more biased towards people who have a work experience. US is kind of in the middle, where some schools appreciate it, and they, of course, you should have a work experience. But there are examples of candidates who are relatively new in their jobs, like they worked for only a year or so, and then they just immediately get that MBA. In India, freshers are a big part of the cohort in the B schools. However, for a medico, my specific request is, please do get a work experience. Evaluate if you like being in that environment. Know what you want to learn when you get out to the MB school, and what you want to kind of graduate with. What kind of job. So if you know that trajectory, no matter where you are at, it will be such a clear journey. It'll be more it'll be a very informed path that you'll be taking, and there's a lot more learning that will come your way.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely get a work experience no matter where you do. Like, it's okay if you are not working in the most strategic team, just get a work experience, try and take up more projects, um, and kind of just be active, just be out there. Like, even if you're working with an NGO, try and take more initiatives, see what you like, what kind of team you don't like, show that depth of experience. So it's it's even if you feel like there's no value add right now, it's going to eventually help you make better decisions.
Right. No, that makes see. I'm a huge proponent, and I think if someone's taking away something from this podcast, please take away this, that you need work experience, especially medicos, because it's like you said, you have to understand if you like the space or not. You cannot just go ahead and make such a huge investment of both money and time without knowing whether you want to be there. Even for Indian B schools, for that matter, I don't think that's a good practice to just directly get in as a fresher. So yeah, that's something that you should definitely take from this podcast. Okay. Okay, how should aspiring medical candidates build their profile for an MBA program? Like, what would you recommend that someone who's currently maybe in college, what should they do? Is there something that they can do? And what makes a profile stand out in college applications? That's also something very important. And yeah, the rest of the questions I'll ask later.
Okay. So I think the first part is quite interesting. What should you do when you're kind of a little early in the decision making journey? But you know that you at some point you want to explore the management school. I think one big thing is there are so many courses and certifications available online, and all from credible school and credible teachers. It's great if you can pick up like a few economics courses, a few finance electives, kind of learn a little about the strategy, about the decision making, about kind of different ways of business plans and model working. So all of that, I think, is great if you can take up 3 to 4 courses at some point. Of course, I know it's quite ambitious to say it, and to be very honest, I myself was not aware that these programs exist. But I think that's something that I've learned. It really helps if you kind of get yourself primed to these courses and certifications that are available. And then when you enter the B school, it's not that big a shock.
Right.
Because when I entered, I was completely lost. I just did not know what's happening. So I think that's a good primer. Number two, someone who is how to build a profile, someone who's, a little early on in their journey, is try and work, try and find different uh, how do you say, like different jobs and roles outside the hospital. It can be part-time, it can be full-time. I think a good way to go about it is like something that Anahita can help you with. Try and get a job for a year after you graduate and see if you really like being in that environment. Of course, this is for someone who is a little early on in their journey, and maybe someone who's who's already practicing in a hospital and so on. They might not immediately find value, but the whole idea is to try and work in a corporate environment for a few months, and just evaluate if you like being in that environment. Just evaluate if you like kind of taking such decisions. Chances are you might not like it, and so it's good to kind of retrace your steps. However, if you really love it, then that's where you kind of going in the depth of taking up new projects, trying and evaluating if you kind of, if you want to do something on the side, if there's like some passive career choices that you can make while you're working on this. Again, this all depends on the situation and the opportunities that you have available. But I would say that do take some time out to work in a corporate environment. It can be through your hospital where you take administrative decisions and you kind of work in the administrative side of the hospital. Or if you are an intern, just take after graduation 6 months, work as a medical advisor, do some content writing, see if you like that kind of job where you have to stare at the desktop for a long time. So that is one thing. The last bit is, I think it is more approachable, is working with an NGO. I know it is not the most typical path, but if you can work with an NGO, either local or something more global, like like Doctors Without Borders, if you can do that kind of work for some time and also approach the local NGOs to help with them with the administrative work, I think that's a good starting point to know if you like that. It's like, just dipping your toes into like very shallow water and testing if you like it. And there might be a very high chance that you'll be like, no, I hate this. I just want to work with my patients. And then immediately you can go back. So these are three big, I think, ways to kind of build a profile or start building a profile. Do courses and certifications. Try and pick up jobs which are non-medical. Like someone like Anahita can really help you with that. And it's okay if you don't get into the strategy side of the team, but like pick up those courses, pick up those jobs, work in a corporate environment for some time. And the third would be take up work with local NGOs. It can be non patient facing work, and try and see if you derive any happiness out of it, if there's any kind of value add you feel you can make when you're working at scale. So those would be three big things. One last thing that I feel helps sometimes is like if you're reading articles um, around the whole healthcare pharma space, like in magazines, and kind of understanding if what their problem statements are, how do the companies make money, what kind of stock movements happen in that. And if that excites you, then I think that is something also which kind of helps you point to the direction of maybe it'll help, it'll be fun to work in that space.
Right, got it.
So
That's
yeah.
actually pretty good advice because even if you can't do like a full-time thing, I think internships also help, to start with and then moving on into that non-clinical internships. So yeah, that. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay. So the next question that comes as a sub part of this is, do medical graduates get any preference over tech graduates? Would that be it? Like the diversity thing that we talk about. So like, how does that work?
Oh, I think it really depends on the school. LBS in particular really values diversity, and it's heavy on the idea of diversity offers new solutions and ideas. So that's just LBS. But in particular, I think medical graduates do have an added advantage. They do bring like a bit of a diversity quotient, but most schools won't kind of keep you on a pedestal for that reason. You have to still kind of show a lot of depth to your work experience, have to show a good score, have to show a good GPA, all of that, and you're still kind of almost competing with other graduates. However, maybe you do have that added advantage of providing a different perspective and bringing a different view to the table. So that is there, but it does not kind of discount you from the whole idea of, oh, you have to kind of deliver and show depth of experience and just a good score. So, but LBS in particular is a great school where they value diversity and they really value the story you bring to the table.
Right.
So, to anyone who is applying, I think that would be a good school to apply to, especially for medicals, because uh, there's so much value add they consider when a person who has a different background comes to the table, and so
Mm-hmm.
you feel kind of celebrated.
That's good to know. That actually is good to know. That's something that works in our favor. So I think that actually makes you feel like you are appreciated of sorts. I mean, I don't know if I'm able to get through it because that's something which we don't really get in our own fraternity. So when you go outside, you realize that how much people actually want to hear what you have to say or what you bring to the table. So that actually gives you an edge. Okay. Yeah, so the next thing, although we've covered this again, but if you can expand on it a little bit, what's the kind of tuition fees one can expect in most of the colleges in across Europe because you've covered LBS. But and what are the living expenses that one can expect in a, let's say, annually or in a month anyways?
Sure. Uh, okay, so it's a little hard to break down because a lot of European B schools have the program running only for a year. However, for LBS, it's 2 years, or they have different exit points. So it kind of just changes how many semesters you're doing the course for. Uh, LBS, particularly right now, I think it's around 120K is the tuition fee. When I did the course, it was around 80K, 80,000 pounds. Um, and that is just the base fee. a lot of it, if you're taking a loan, is already covered. So like, and there's scholarship available. So that is a chunk. There's the base chunk, right? So in terms of the living expenses, or just kind of the expense of doing an MBA, so a good way to start it or thinking about it is, one is the fees of doing the program plus the living expenses. Now, the fees of doing the program is, of course, about 120K for LBS right now. I think for different schools, it'll be a little lower because if you're doing it in Europe for just 4 semesters, like basically 1 year, then it's a little shorter. So you don't have to, like, the fees will be a little lower. Um, that is the base fee. So that can possibly be covered by the scholarship, by the loan, and of course, your own savings and family support. So that is one part. Then there is the living expenses. Now, the living expenses is a tricky part because different people manage it in a different way. And I think a good rule of thumb would be around 2.5, 3K as a monthly expense to kind of allot to this. And then depending on how many months you're there, you kind of just multiply it by that. So say, suppose you are having 3K, 3,000 pounds, as which includes your bills, your rent, all the other um, additional, like eating out, going to different programs and all these things. Like 3K is also like, um, it gives you that additional coverage of around 10 to 15%, which is rolled over to the next month. So if you consider all of that, and like I'm giving the most inflated numbers, okay, and then multiply it by 24, that is the number you should consider as a living expense. However, so much of it can be subsidized if you kind of find a scholarship, if you kind of are just living a very simple life, which sadly for doing a B school is quite difficult because there are multiple things happening, and then you have to participate in different programs and like go to a different trek in different country and so on. Like there's a lot of social component. So it's a bit of a spoiled way of doing things, but all of that, um, then the cost can come down quite a lot. But I would say 2.5, 3K is where I would put living expenses on. And then you just multiply it by the number of months you're there. Also, please remember, it's quite easy to find an internship while you're there. So you can do a few part-time internships, and that really helps you cover a few costs. So it's of course not going to be a big like boost to your expense, to your finances. It's not going to like cover everything, but just remember that that also helps sometimes. um yeah, so this is like a good framework. And addition on top of this, I don't think there were many other expenses uh beyond this that I kind of spent on. I think this is the base that I worked with.
Right. That sounds expensive, but I think it's worth going in the whole, considering, the kind of return of investment you can get from there. So that, but in general,
And see,
London is,
I think one more thing is, when I was researching about it, I could not get the visibility of how much the expense would be. So
yeah.
that was also a big problem because I didn't know like how much money do I need when I'm living there, what kind of rent is a good rent,
Hmm.
how much is it too much, how much is too less.
Yeah.
Also, you don't want to like go there and kind of just be that basic where you kind of compromise on uh, like the MBA experience because you're cooking dinner at home the whole day, like, so you also have to be a little practical when you approach all these things.
Yeah.
um so for me, I didn't even have that visibility. So I think a good place to start is just getting that visibility, where if you allot say 2K for 24 months, you know that this much money should be available in the vicinity when you go for such a program.
Hmm. True. And that's why we're doing this, that's the whole purpose why I do this. So that, because I've actually felt that a lot of people just take the decision to go out and they're not equipped with all. Because, see, to be honest, when you don't get an experience, or when you don't speak to someone who's been through it before, you can never understand what the actual, expenses or the structure or the course is going to look like. So I think that's
And
why, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, don't you think also for medicos, it's a little difficult to find the precursor? Like when I went, I did not know anyone who had a similar background as mine and had approached doing an MBA, and or like even the people who were outside B school, like outside medicine, I didn't know them well enough to ask them such personal questions because of
Right.
course I think like no one kind of talks about these things, right? So I think all these things, like you said, it's just very interesting that when you bring out such podcasts, it just sensitizes you that one, there are many other people who've done it, and number two is these things that no one talks about, but your fraternity can give you that kind of insight.
Yeah.
So like I appreciate you for doing that.
Thank you so much. I really, really hope that it helps. It's helping me. So, I mean, this is a podcast pretty personal to me, but it's definitely helping me out on that front because I've seen a lot of people go there, struggle, come back here, not able to figure that out. But you're right, getting it from the community is something different. And that sort of hesitation that stays. Once you become a part of a cohort, then maybe things change. But yeah, initially that hesitation definitely stays. Okay. Another thing, I just remembered a question of how many Indian students are there on an average?
Oh my god, I think it's mini India.
Okay,
It's
beautiful.
more than 10%, like it's around 10 to 15%, especially for LBS. For USB schools, the home students constitute around 60 to 70% of the class, and rest of the world constitutes around 30 to 40%. So in that, Indians are around 3 to 5%. However, for LBS or for the UK, the numbers are much higher. So at least in LBS, it was around 10 to 15% of Indian students for the MBA program.
Got it. And what is the size of a cohort and what is the size of a cohort? Yeah.
So one class, the B school, like the MBA class, consists of around 500 students roughly, and per section, like we had section in school, we had sections, right? A to whatever. Here also there are streams. So the whole class is divided into stream A to F. So six streams, and in that six streams, there are about 80 to 90 students.
Got it.
Of course, every year the number changes, increases
Hmm.
or decreases, but this is an average.
Right.
Also, I think one thing that we like, I think is good to evaluate is what is the teacher to student ratio. Personally, I don't think there's any value add in it, because when you go from a medical background where you're just thrown in a big batch and you just have to figure out everything on your own, it doesn't really now give you a kick of like being in a smaller teacher to student ratio. But I know a lot of people who evaluate this whole B school decision do think about how big is the class and how many teachers are there per class. And I know Cornell had a very good teacher to student ratio where there were there's a small group, like 30 students per class or something like that. And I know a lot of people appreciated that factor where they could get that one on one.
Hmm.
So, but I don't see there's any value add. Most schools in in the US, UK, the teachers are super friendly and approachable. So you can just, go have a chat with them. If you want to meet them outside school in a cafe and just kind of get some learnings out of their learnings, it's they're approachable. So you can do
Right.
that. And so you don't need to be in a small classroom to get that attention.
Hmm, got it. And yeah, you're right. We are used to, figuring stuff out on our own. Most of us have done that. Like most of us, our cohorts are so big in general. So yeah, that's how that is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So now I think how what are the financing options? Like if you have what are the financing options and how does one get a scholarship? Are there different procedures? How do we apply? How do we increase our chances of getting a scholarship?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So overall, there are three to four big buckets. The first one is, of course, scholarship, right? Every school also has certain patrons who have their own scholarships in that school. Then there are generalized scholarships. Like in India, Tata has runs a scholarship. I know Birla's also started a general scholarship for students going abroad to study. So these are good scholarship programs to research about and kind of apply. However, just I think what is important here is like you have to be a first or second round candidate for this. If you're one of the last folks, the scholarships are already gone by then. So if you are banking on scholarship to get you to the course or get you through the course, one thing that's important is please apply early. And like in that way, like when you're thinking about your MBA journey, start approaching the standardized test like at least 1.5 years before you kind of want to go to the school, because scholarship is such a tricky part and you really need to start early for that. So there are
Right.
these scholarships specific to the school and in general for in India. There, I know Tata runs a very nice scholarship for students who are going abroad to study, and you can apply there for their course for their scholarship, I think in October-ish. So that is something that you should keep on the in your line of sight. It's all available online, so you can definitely reach out to that, like read about it. But on LinkedIn, also reach out to people who've gotten those scholarships and see how they kind of approached it. Right?
Right.
That is number one. Number two is, of course, the loan, student loan. So there's Prodigy that's extremely popular in the student circuit. Um, Student loan, I think most people I know got the loan and they didn't really have to like worry about the collaterals and the additional documents that are required. It's quite achievable and it's easy to kind of, not easy is a understatement, but it's achievable to get to that loan. And that's number two. Uh, Number three is, of course, self-funding. No matter what you do, it's breaks my heart to say it, you will have to self-fund a part of your program, and that will require some savings. So even if you've kind of got everything covered, there will still be a part of it for at least for the first few months where you have to fund it yourself and like require that support. If you're, if you're lucky enough, if that's seeing the structure of your family, you can of course ask for help. But it'll always be good to have some savings handy for that part. And I think the last part is just familial support, like just getting that support from the family and requesting them to kind of help you fund your education. I know in India it's a little more common for families helping their kids out, and I am extremely grateful for that personally as well. However, I think it's good to have that as not your only source of funding. So
Right.
just kind of keep all these things in the view. In terms of how to get a scholarship, because that's a specific part that can sometimes get tricky, and that just takes a lot of burden off. You can reach out to the admissions committee when you're applying to these schools a few days before application. Ask for a one-on-one call to understand what kind of scholarship opportunities lie with them, and also understand how their application process is. For LBS specifically, there was no separate application. You just had to, like, we go through the vanilla process and they self-select students. This is an interesting part because I feel like it just took a lot of burden off me when I was applying through this, going through the application process, because I just had to be like focus on one application and make it as clean as possible. However, for the US schools, you do need to kind of go through a separate application process for the scholarships. So it's good to not take this for granted and kind of research about all the schools and reach out to all their admission committees and understand this. One thing that I also should mention is if you're considering going to a B school for any management program, All these B schools have career fairs in Bombay, Delhi, even Chandigarh for that matter. And if you have a chance, please, please, please go to these career fairs, get to know these folks, network a little, know the admission committee, try and kind of be curious about the school. Don't take everything that you know and read about the school online as a granted fact. Like, go and ask about the school. This really helps. And especially for the funding, it's a very good opportunity to understand the scholarship opportunities and funding opportunities available for the school. So that is that. In scholarship also, like, your good GMAT score or a GRE score really helps. So if you have an exceptional score, that itself increases your chances many-fold to get the scholarship. Some of these schools also have an additional comments section where you can write your desire to get scholarship, and you can kind of you can kind of support it with evidence. So also, I would say, use that opportunity if this is really a deal breaker for you. And one thing that I just wanted to mention here is, if you are lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to fund your education by yourself or with the help of your family, then please do not take up the scholarship or kind of crowd it with, like, take many scholarships up, because a lot of deserving candidates then cannot get the opportunity, and then they have to pass on this opportunity. So if you have that slight bit of advantage, just like, let someone else have that. I saw a few candidates, at least that I know personally, they could probably pass on that scholarship to someone else. But yeah, something I really hope that someone gets advantaged by.
That's actually a pretty good thing to, say. It takes a lot of selflessness to do that, but then that makes a lot of sense that if you do have, I would say, privilege to fund your own, education, then just go ahead and do that rather than take the scholarship. That makes a lot of sense, to be
Yeah, I
honest.
know I'm saying it with a lot of, like, it's a privilege to say it also, but I know there are so many deserving candidates who let go of such opportunities because they cannot fund it. And
Right.
if they get that scholarship, they can, of course, get
Hmm.
that opportunity. So
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so I think that's all that I had. And thank you so much for doing this with us. And there's one more thing for those of you who stuck till the end. I'm pretty sure that you're very serious on the whole application process. I just want you to know that Ruchi is someone who can also guide you with your whole application process. She vets SOPs. She also vets LORs, if I'm not wrong, and she has the, you can just reach out to her, connect with her on LinkedIn. She has a whole system in place where you can book sessions with her for consultation, so do check that out. And I will 100% guarantee you that she is one of the finest people to reach out to take help from. And yeah, that's it from our side. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to her directly, or you can drop us a message on Odigio and we will get back to you. But thank you so much, Ruchi, for doing this with us, because this definitely helped me 100%. Like, I know way more now than I knew from the internet. So this actually helped me a lot. And thank you so much for giving us your time.
thank you so much, Anahita. I'm so happy that you are doing something like this. Like, I wish I had this kind of resource available when I started out. So I'm just very proud that you're doing it. And I think the whole medical community overall must be thanking you for creating that kind of space for alternate careers.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm able to grow this to much bigger heights someday. But thank you. Thank you so much for doing this with us. And yes, if you like this, we will definitely bring out some additional information for you in another podcast sometime. So drop us a comment if you can, and also share it with the people who need it. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and listening to it. Okay,
Thank
bye
you.
bye.
Bye.